Okay, so I've decided to finally talk about this now that some time has passed. But as some of you may know, a while back ago, my rescue dog Snoop passed away, and it was really hard for me to deal with. I loved him quite a bit. He was a very special dog, and he really came into a point in my life where I was struggling a lot with my mental health, and he helped me out a lot. It made me feel like I had purpose in my life when I had Snoop. So now that some time has passed to the point where I don't cry every time I talk about this, I'm going to tell you guys how I met Snoop, basically his story, my little Snoop story, his little life, because he was a really amazing dog and he really overcame a lot of hardships. So, oh gosh, it was about 3 years ago. I was working at this dog boarding facility, and like I said, really stressful time in my life, dealing with a lot of dark stuff. And basically what I would do is I would clean all the dog cages and take the dogs out to go potty. So I was cleaning up all the dog shit, basically. And there's all these little sections in the dog boarding facility, and one day they decided to put me in the main section where most of the dogs are at. And I was really nervous about it because that's a lot of dogs to clean up after. But when I get there, that's where I see Snoop for the first time in my life. He was in this tiny little pen, and there was a sign on him that said rescue. I was not aware that we did any rescue work here. I thought I was just, like, watching other people's dogs. So I decided since he was definitely going to be here a while, I'd be extra nice to him. It was this tiny little old man rat terrier sleeping on this bed, and I snuck in there and I tucked him in, and he was just so cute. So the next day was my first real interaction with Snoop. I was feeding all the dogs in the morning, and I was reaching down to replace his old yucky food, and he flinched really hard and fell over. So I kind of put two and two together and realized that he had been abused before. So I realized I needed to be really slow and careful with him. I felt so bad. I picked him up and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, Snoop. It's okay. No one's going to hurt you here. And then he just started wagging his little tail, the little nubbins. And I decided I was just going to have to be really slow with him and really careful. Snoop was a very interesting dog. I found myself trying to make sure I was the one that always took him out to pee during his potty breaks, and trying to spend all my free time with him. I remember one day I was in the main dog kennel area, and while I was cleaning the cages, I heard this weird dragging noise coming from one of the kennels. Just horrible noise. So I look around, and then I see Snoop was stuck under one of the beds. We had these raised beds that were made out of PVC pipe, and he was stuck under it, and he's just dragging it around on the concrete floor, so it's making this noise. And so I go in there, and I get him out. And he looks at me, and he wags his tail. I'm like, okay, good, you're all fixed now. And I leave, and then I start hearing a new noise. And he's on top of the bed, and he's digging into the bed, and you just hear, and I'm like, okay. And then, like, the next day, he was under the bed again. He just really liked being under the bed and dragging it around. And he was just such a friendly little dog, and he always wanted everyone's attention. He was just the sweetest little thing. And I started to feel really bad for him because I had been there for a while now and no one had shown any interest in adopting him. So I thought, hey, maybe I can foster him and, like, take some cute pictures of him, get him out of the kennel so he can have some fun times outside the kennel, and I'll post the pictures online and maybe someone will adopt him. So I tried to bring it up with Zach, and he was really against the idea, but eventually he caved, but he said, I can only foster Snoop on weekends. I thought that was good enough for me, and my boss agreed. So I remember the day I got all his stuff, and I was getting ready to take him home. He was so excited. He jumped in my lap while I was driving, and fell asleep in my lap. Made it very difficult to drive because he put his head on my arm while I was holding the steering wheel. But I get home and I realized, he peed on me a little while I was driving. I did not realize how special needs Snoop was when I first got him. I only knew that he had some teeth issues and that he humps a lot of dogs. That is all I knew at this time. I should have asked more questions because I was completely underprepared the first night I had Snoop home. First thing he did was he tried to pee all over the house because Snoop, it turns out, had kidney disease and bladder issues, so he could not hold his pee. And we had 2 female dogs, my dog Snickers and my roommate's dog Pandora. He tried to hump both of them. So we had to keep them away because he was making them mad. And also he tried to hump the pillows on the couch, and he tried to get into everything. I was so tired the first day. I put him to bed in the kitchen because that was where we had the tile floor. It'd be easier to clean up any of his messes. And I woke up in the morning and he found this big bag of cereal, climbed up onto the table to get it, which is a very small dog, so he maneuvered around to get this cereal, pulled it out and just ripped a giant hole in it, and he was just munching away, and I'm yelling at him like, Snoop, Snoop, and I'm clapping my hands like, what are you doing? I then realized at this point he was mostly deaf and blind, because until I got right in his face, he did not notice me. And then he got up and he's like, oh, hello, you're there. I did nothing wrong. So I cleaned up the mess. I went to PetSmart and I'm going to get you diapers. I got him diapers and pee pads and cleaning supplies. I also bought him a shirt that said handsome boy because he was such a handsome little boy. And I got him some toys because he never had toys of his own. And I wanted him to have some toys. And then I fell in love with him. He was so good during the weekend after that. He just wanted cuddles and pets, and he was so happy that he got all these toys and all this attention and that he got out of the shelter. So I tried to convince Zach to let me foster him full time, but Zach was really upset of how much he peed because Zach is a germaphobe. And as I packed him in the car so I could go to work on Monday, he started crying, and this dog didn't make any noise, okay? He knew I was taking him back, and he started vocalizing for the first time that I've ever met him. And then I started crying because I was really sad about it. Everyone noticed I really bonded with him, and they asked if I was going to adopt him, and I was crying that no, Zach didn't want me to. But my boss was like, oh, don't worry. We can convince him. And we did eventually. And when I put Snoop back in the kennel, he was in and he was off the main floor now. He was in a different room. And as I left to go clean up, he started barking. And this is, again, the first time I heard this dog. I thought he was completely mute. I didn't know he made any sounds. He started barking for me, and then I cried more.
Was very good.
But then, unfortunately, as my luck has it, things started to go bad. Something was definitely off about Snoop. He used to, just chow down on his food, go to town. He stopped eating. He was definitely more lethargic. He didn't want to move, run around, which is definitely unlike him. He was a very happy dog. He loved any attention he got. And he just kind of laid in bed all day. And I was getting really worried we all started to think maybe he would die soon because of how old he was and stuff. So when it was my turn to foster him, again, during this next weekend, I got a bunch of stuff. And, like, I was checking his temperature every couple of hours. I was giving him calorie paste because he wasn't eating or drinking. I was also syringing water into his mouth. I even slept on the floor next to him, and I woke up every couple of hours to syringe more water into him and take his temp and stuff, and I was writing everything down. And I think my boss took pity on me because she could tell how much I loved this dog. And I called her, like, crying. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with him. And she's like, okay, tomorrow morning I called the vet, take him down there, and we're going to get things figured out. I drop him off at the vet, and I'm talking to them and stuff, and they say, listen, he might have sepsis, and, like, there's some blood issue he's having. And they're like, we're going to try everything we can, but we don't know for sure if he's going to make it. And then I broke down crying really hard, and I was like, oh, please save him. He's my baby. I love him so much. And they were really nice. They hugged me, and they promised me they'd do as much as they could. And my boss, like, spent thousands of dollars to keep him on, like, fluids and constantly monitored overnight and everything for several days. Oh, God, I think he was there for a couple weeks. And I visited him every day, sometimes twice a day. Like, before I'd go to work, I'd go in, check on him. And, like, after I left work, I'd go check on him before I go home some nights. And just seeing him all sad and, like, in that cage and attached to all these wires and stuff. And I felt really bad for him because he never got to have a good life that most dogs have. Because during this time, my coworkers were asking me about him, like, if he was going to be okay. And I found out what happened to Snoop and how they got him. So it was a really harsh winter, and they got this phone call from a man asking if they scanned dogs to see if they have a microchip because he had found this dog. And we do, so he brought Snoop in, and they thought his leg was broken when he was first brought in because he was limping. Very thin, sickly looking dog. And the guy's acting really weird. And they start to bring him to the back, and he's like, oh, wait, can I have that leash? It's for my other dog. And they're like, yeah, sure. And then he runs to his car and leaves, bolts out of the driveway. And it was kind of obvious that this guy was probably Snoop's owner, and he dropped him off and because he didn't want him anymore. Which some of my coworkers were like, he did the right thing. But honestly, I think the only reason he dropped Snoop off to this day was because it was so cold out that winter. He didn't want to dig a hole to bury him. And I think he's a piece of shit. I hate that guy. We had to spend so much money to help Snoop with all his medical issues. We had to work so hard to teach him it was safe. He used to jump all the time if you moved too fast around him because he was used to being hit. The vets think that he was left outside his whole entire life. This tiny, short-haired rat terrier left outside during these harsh winters and hit all his life. He had so many medical issues. I think this guy just chose the easy way out. And honestly, fuck that guy. If you're that guy and you see this, I fucking hate your guts. I had to pick up the pieces and teach Snoop that he was safe and loved. And it was because there are shitty people out there like that guy. One day, I went in, and when I was looking at Snoop, and this was still during the beginning, and we're not sure if he was going to live, I broke down crying to him, and I promised him if he made it through this, I would adopt him, and I would give him the good life that he deserved. and he would never have to look for another home again, and I would be his forever home. And he did. He pulled through this. He pulled through freaking sepsis. He was very determined. A very determined dog. But now there was a problem. I had to convince Zach to let me keep Snoop. And Zach did not like that idea because of how messy Snoop was. But unfortunately for Zach, I always get my way. Because I just do. And I wanted Snoop. So eventually I convinced Zach to let me adopt Snoop. And I did. And I remember the day I was so excited. I took him home. And I was just so happy we were going to be a family. He was going to have a good life. But unfortunately my luck is pretty bad. And the next day Snoop wasn't doing so well. He was shaking like he was in pain. So I took him to the vet. And she did some blood work. This wasn't his normal vet. This was the vet near my house. And she said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. He could have kidney failure. His blood work doesn't look good. And of course I cried and I was horribly heartbroken because I felt like I just saved him. And we just got out of these big medical issues and now he's back looking like he might die again. And I knew when I adopted Snoop, he had a lot more issues than I thought, and that our time would be short together, whatever time we had together. But it was just so frustrating that I just got him, and the next day, it seems like we're back at square one. And I was devastated, and I was crying at work all the time, and I was looking up what I can do for kidney failure because I didn't know anything about kidney failure and there's literally nothing we could do. So I decided I was going to get an ultrasound done on his kidneys just to see how bad it is and kind of gauge how much time we have. And I was surprised when I get a call saying, oh no, he doesn't have kidney failure. Snoop had chronic kidney disease, which is not kidney failure yet. Kidney failure it's the end. They're gonna die. Kidney disease is bad, but it's not the end. And he also had a very bad bladder infection, but no kidney failure. So this is, even though it wasn't the best news, it was great news because he wasn't gonna just die possibly in just like a couple weeks or so and I wouldn't have to put him down right away. And it's definitely tricky to take care of because when a dog has these kind of issues, they need to have a lot of clean drinking water. Like I got all these dog fountains to make sure the water was nice and clean for them. I didn't just trust the tap, and I made sure he always had access to fresh water. But also because of that and how he was so old, he couldn't hold it all the time, so he made quite a bit of messes. So I had to get him all these diapers, and I'd have to clean the house every day and do a deep clean every week. It was a lot of work, but it was worth it for him because I just loved him so much. He was just such a wonderful dog. He made me so happy. And I really felt like I had a purpose taking care of him. After this, I remember we decided I was going to upgrade his bed to a fancy orthopedic dog bed. He had an okay bed right now. It wasn't anything really fancy. I really wanted to make a space in the house that was for him where he could be safe because he couldn't sleep with us at night because he wandered around and we have birds upstairs and I was worried he'd hurt the birds or hurt himself or like fall down the stairs if we accidentally let the door open. So he had this pen and I was upgrading the pen because I didn't want him to sleep in a cage all the time. It took up half of our living room. And so I took him to PetSmart to get a orthopedic bed, and I remember I pulled one out and I asked him, oh, do you like this one, Snoop? And he like kind of sniffed and snorted on it and started like going in little circles around it and then wagging his little tail. He was so happy. I'm like, okay, that you want this one. I get it. And, the next day, well, it wasn't the next day, I think a week later, I realized these beds weren't going to last very long. Because I had to put a trash bag over the foam part to keep it safe from night accidents. And for some reason, Snoop loved the sound of plastic. He was always tearing up plastic bags or anything that you left out. He chewed a giant hole into the bed. And I found him sleeping in the giant hole one morning when I woke up. He had done this to, like, several beds. Because I kept getting the same one. Until Zach pointed out maybe he likes to make giant holes in the bed because it makes him feel safe and surrounded. And since he was so anxious all the time with all the trauma he had been through, I'm like, that does make a lot of sense. So we got him this giant orthopedic cuddler. And that worked. It was more durable. He didn't tear giant holes into it. And that was his bed for a long time. And he had that in his giant pen. He had lights, nice little fairy lights, so if he got up in the middle of the night, even though he was mostly blind, it wouldn't be completely dark and scary for him. He had a ton of toys. He had a heated mat in there that was waterproof. He had his little dog fountain in there. He was bougie. He lived in the lap of luxury. He was a very bougie dog. After a while, I realized, though, we would need to address another medical issue Snoop had. You see, Snoop had horrible teeth because of all his years of neglect. A lot of them were rotten, and we had a good amount of them removed before when he went under surgery, before I started even fostering him. But there were still so many that were just really bad. And you could tell his mouth was really painful. He never played with toys, really. He might pick them up, but he never really played with them because his mouth would hurt so bad. He also had a hole in his mouth that led up to his nasal cavity, which, of course, is really bad because if something gets up in there, like food, it could rot in there. So we really needed to get that done. I talked to my vet, and they were willing to work out a payment plan with me, thank God, because it was going to cost me $1,400 to get his teeth fixed. And I remember dropping him off, and I was so nervous because I heard before that he didn't do too well under anesthesia. And I was really afraid that if he went under anesthesia, he might die. I waited impatiently all day. And then I got the call that he was ready to be picked up. I get over there. Oh, my goodness. They did such a good job. It could have costed me quite a bit more money if things were worse. But no, they managed to remove most of his teeth, unfortunately. His good teeth were still in there. And they sewed up that hole really well. And it was just so great. I remember saying, "Hi, Snoop, how are you doing?" And I put my hand under his chest, and he tries to put his full weight on me because he was so high from when I picked him up. And I have these pictures of him in his little, with the little cone around him when I was giving him peanut butter when he was healing during this time and stuff. And after this, you could see a major improvement in his life. He was so happy. He could eat, and he wasn't in pain anymore. I have this one picture where he realized he could play with toys and it wouldn't hurt anymore. It was one of my favorite pictures of him. The day he realized he could play with toys, and we started playing, and I started crying a bit because before we couldn't really do this because everything was so painful for him. He couldn't have all this stuff in his mouth. And I was just so happy that he was no longer in pain. And it looked like we were starting to really make progress in his life, where things were really going to turn out good for him. After this, he started to become a little bit more of a troublemaker. He's always kind of been a troublemaker, but now he kind of amped it up because he wasn't in so much pain. We'd, sit down at the table. Snoop had really poor table manners, and he would snatch any food that he could get to. We'd have to block off the table from him. He also started stealing socks. I don't know what it was, but he loved socks. Really obsessed with them. He had this whole pile of socks that he had stolen. And he'd get really upset and chase you around the house. This old dog trying to slowly chase you around the house because you stole his socks. Like, when he found one, he would proudly run, like, 2 big circles around the house before putting it in his pile and, like, reorganizing his pile of socks. Oh my god, he was just so funny. He also used to, like, I had Snickers food behind a door in the basement. He would get back there, eat until he was full, realize he's stuck and he can't because he couldn't go up or downstairs, and then he'd bark for me to come save him after he just ate all this food he wasn't supposed to. And he'd just wag his tail at me like, yeah, I know I did something wrong, but oh well, now that you're here, get me out of this. We started really having more fun together. At this time, I was working night shift at a different job, so I could have more money to take care of him. And when I would get out of work at like freaking 8 in the morning, I would pack them both up and we'd go to the dog park. And oh my gosh, he loved it. He couldn't really keep up with the other dogs because of how old he was, but he'd really try. He'd follow all these dogs around. All these dogs would circle him. They were really interested in him. He'd like circle the whole perimeter of the park and just like peeing on everything and marking his territory. And oh my gosh, I remember every time it was time for us to go home, I'd be calling for him, and I know it was loud enough for him to hear, but he'd try to like hobble away. He'd just slowly prance away from me. So like, I don't hear you, Mom, it's not time to go. And I'd have to go scoop him and Snickers up. I also decided around this time I was going to throw a birthday party for both him and Snickers. And I invited a bunch of friends from work, and 2 of them brought their dogs. And oh, it was just so much fun. Snoop was like following the puppy and this big old dog around the house, and Snickers was playing with them. And I made cupcakes and dog-safe ice cream for them all, and they all got that. Snoop was so tired by the end of this party. Right before it ended, he crashed and fell asleep on one of the beds. But it was such a nice little party. I have pictures of him wearing a little party hat, and oh my god, he loved the cupcake and the dog ice cream. Whenever he found food that he really loved, his eyes would just open really wide, and he did that. And I was so happy that they got a nice little birthday party together. He was always just doing fun little things. Like, one time, my friend brought over a bag of marshmallows, and we were going to make s'mores, and she was sitting on the floor with the bag of marshmallows, and he smelled them. He had a really good nose, and he starts trying to grab them from her, and she's running around in a circle trying to keep him from having them. And, oh my god, the things he would find. One time he found a whole loaf of bread outside. I don't know how he did it, but he did. And he tried to bring that whole loaf of bread inside and was very upset with me when I would not let him bring the outside bread inside. And one time he dived under my neighbor's fence to get a chicken wing he found. And another time I was working outside in the garden, and he dove under the fence, and we thought we lost him. He was found by some guys playing frisbee across the street. They said they saw him, and my roommate found him under a car. He decided to go on an adventure that day. Oh my goodness. He could get into some trouble. And some people couldn't keep up with him. But I never minded that. He was so fun. I loved having him around. And we'd cuddle all the time, too. He was just such a sweet little dog. I'd always fall asleep on the couch with him whenever we cuddled. And we had a lot of fun together and a lot of good experiences with him. But unfortunately, with all his issues, our time was limited. Near the end, I noticed he started to slow down a lot, and he started peeing blood, which was kind of normal for him because he was prone to UTIs. So I took him to the hospital, and he was on very, very strong antibiotics because his kidney values were starting to look bad again, and because of the UTI he had. And suddenly he didn't want to eat anymore, and I thought at first it was because there was a nationwide shortage on the prescription food he liked, and we had to get a different prescription brand. But even when I started cooking chicken and putting it in there, and turkey dogs, and he would never even finish his food, which is really not normal for him. One night around 3 a.m., he started howling, and he wouldn't calm down. It was really unlike him. So I ended up sleeping on the couch with him to calm him down, and I called the vet, and I told her all these things that were happening. And they told me to bring him in the next day, and they were going to keep him all day for observation. I ended up sleeping on the couch with him again that night, and unfortunately that I did not know that was going to be our last night together. I really was hoping that he'd pull through like all the other times he managed to pull through before. And I dropped him off early that morning, and a couple hours later while I was at work, I got a phone call, and they told me Snoop had a bad seizure, and the whole staff had to stop to help him. And he was alive, but they wanted to talk to me more about it in person. And you know it's bad when they don't tell you over the phone everything that's happening. And I got off work, and they invited me inside, which they weren't doing because of COVID normally during this time. And they brought Snoop out to me, and they handed me Snoop, and he was wrapped up in a blanket, and he had like an IV in him, and he was so out of it from the seizure and the sedation medicine that it took him a couple minutes to realize I was holding him, and I knew it was really bad. The doctor told me he had a seizure, and she told me at his age it most likely meant that he had a brain tumor. And they also told me that they took his pee directly from his bladder to test it, and it was brown from the blood, and then he started bleeding downstairs, and that he was on the strongest antibiotics they had at their facility, and they weren't helping him anymore. And we knew there was nothing more we could do for him, that he wasn't going to get better this time. And he was in a lot of pain. I hated hearing him cry that night before from how much pain he was in, and I didn't want him to suffer anymore. So I held him in my arms one last time, and I told him how much I loved him, and how much everyone loved him, and how proud I was of him, and how I wish I could have had more time with him. And he was my baby. And I kissed his head. And my dad came, so I wasn't alone. And we put him to sleep. It's been really hard since he passed away. He was really important to me. He gave me purpose in my life. And I spent so much time taking care of him. And I still think about him every day, even though it's been months. He really was my baby. He was a really special dog, and I really wish we could have had more time together.
And even though our time was short and there was a lot of bad things that did happen and a lot of difficult times, I would do it all over if I could. I'd adopt him sooner. He brought me so much joy in my life, and he was so important to me. I know a lot of people don't like dealing with special needs animals, but just because they're like special needs and they can be a lot of work doesn't mean they're not worth it. I'd do anything if I could have him back. It's really hard. I wanted to be able to fix him and make him better, even though I knew it wasn't possible. I know sometimes you can't fix things and you can't make things better. And sometimes it's really hard when you're dealing with someone who has chronic illness like he did, watching them get sicker and sicker. But it was worth it. Snoop gave me so much love and joy, and I'll never forget him. And I'll never forget the time we had together. He was a really special dog. And he made me realize I want to help more animals like him. And I do want to get more special needs animals that maybe aren't given a chance because of their issues, and help him. It's been really heartbreaking dealing with his death, but I realize you can only really feel that pain if you really love someone. And I hope more people, after maybe hearing this, will give animals like him a chance, because he was really just a wonderful dog, and I miss him every day.